Okay, so thanks very much for coming along to our Avoiding Procrastination workshop today. What we're going to be doing essentially is talking about how to avoid that, that awful kind of experience of putting things off and having to do them in a very kind of panic-induced state towards the deadlines. So trust me, procrastination is a common human struggle, definitely speaking. And obviously right now, particularly in the midst of COVID-19 and the pandemic and having to study from home, it definitely poses some additional challenges for managing procrastination, which we'll talk about. So what is procrastination? We probably all know what procrastination is to ourselves, but essentially it is the act of putting off or delaying something, especially something that's requiring an immediate attention. So it could be that you have a deadline coming up in 2 or 3 days' time, or you have an exam that's very big that you have to study for coming up as well. And some kind of common things you might find are, maybe some things that we say to ourselves to kind of justify the procrastination. So we say, oh, it's 7 minutes past 4, so I'll just have to start at half, so we kind of push it off till half past, or I'll just do it later. Or another one might be, I'll just watch one more YouTube video before starting into it. So it's kind of this case of consistently putting something off, even if it's a very small, tiny little task or activity that you may do, be it if it's doing the laundry or watching another video or something like that. All of these things can then add up to being that we might lose a whole day or a whole week, and even more so towards the work that we have to do. So let's just look, if we talk about the stages of procrastination. Unfortunately, there is kind of stages of procrastination. The first one being always is the false sense of security. So it's saying to ourselves, we have loads of time, I'll just be able to relax. For example, the exams in May can seem very, very far away right now, so it's kind of like, oh, it's grand, I won't think about that just yet. Then obviously we start to look a little bit around. It might turn into a little bit of laziness in a sense of saying, oh, maybe I should get a head start now, but nah, there's probably no need for me to do that. Then we start to kind of look at a few excuses, it's saying I'm busy right now, or I'll just take another short break or something like that. And then as we get closer and closer to the deadline, it's kind of starting to look at a bit of denial and saying, I've plenty of time still. It's grand, and we might start to actually, forfeit or sacrifice certain other things, for example, the likes of sleep and things like that. And then stage 5 is the crisis. So, it's the deadline is coming up tomorrow, or it's in a few hours' time, and you're trying to get all you can get done in that kind of deadline-induced panic. And you say to yourself, I'm never going to procrastinate again. And then number 6 is that we repeat. And it may not repeat all the time, but this is sometimes what happens is when we're in that crisis phase, we say, I'm never doing this again, ever, ever, ever again. And then the next semester comes around and we might end up doing this quite similarly again. So what's important is to kind of take or be acknowledging of the stages of procrastination. Yeah, absolutely, Sean. Point 5 is definitely what we've all experienced in some shape or form. So I suppose then, why do we procrastinate? There's actually a lot of reasons why we do procrastinate, and a lot of people think that it's to do with just being lazy, but it's actually not at all. All of us procrastinate, and it doesn't mean that we're a lazy person. Actually, a lot of the time, the reason why we procrastinate doing something is because we're anxious about that particular thing. So, for example, one element might be the fear of failure or fear of success. So that you fear failing the particular thing that you have to do. So let's say if it's an exam or writing an essay or something like that, or the fear of success in the opposite direction means that you fear what else you're going to have to do if you're actually successful. So it's the fear of the unknown, really. The other thing then is coping with stress. And this is really fundamentally what procrastination is. We get stressed in the moment, and to deal with that stress, we procrastinate. So we put off doing the thing that's causing us stress. In the moment, we've dealt with our stress. But in the long term, we haven't, unfortunately. And actually, more so, our future selves are going to be even more stressed because we have less time to do it. So procrastination is a coping mechanism. It's just not a very helpful one in the long run. The next thing then is a thing called perfectionism paralysis. And what this means is that if we want something to be very, very perfect or to a very, very high level, and we actually, which is quite unrealistic, we then get kind of paralyzed to being able to do the work at all. So we may not actually start that essay at all because we want it to be so good, if that makes sense. The next thing then is that actually just feeling like the task will take too long. So let's say if you do have a very big task, like an essay you have to write, or you have a whole semester worth of material to study and things like that, it can feel like a really big mountain that you have to climb. And obviously that can put us off. Our brains are automated to try find the easiest possible route, which is procrastination. The next thing then is also feeling frustrated. So, you know, if there's something that, let's say, particularly with any new skill that we're trying to learn or a new concept, there may be a period at the start where we don't actually fully understand what we're learning, or we don't fully understand the particular concept, which is very normal. But that frustration can lead us to procrastinate doing it because we don't understand it. Whereas actually we do need to just keep sitting down and keep going back over the stuff until that stuff does click with us, I suppose. And then the last thing is that a lack of interest or motivation. So like I said, it's nothing to do about being lazy, but there may be certain modules where you're just not as interested in them, or it's just a harder module, or it's just not, there's always going to be modules where we just don't particularly love them, you know, in comparison to other ones. And then we tend to maybe procrastinate the work for those ones more so than others. So I suppose what I'm trying to say here is that procrastination really, it's nothing to do with us as people being lazy. It's actually to do with the fact of maybe the thing that we're procrastinating is causing us stress. So just coming here, obviously, how to manage procrastination. One of my favorite kind of quotes for procrastination is someday is not a day of the week. So when we say, you know, I'll do that someday, or I'll start that someday, unfortunately, Sunday is not a day of the week. And then as our lovely little kind of cartoon character here says, I'm not a procrastinator, I just prefer doing all of my work in a deadline-induced panic. And you know, some people might report that they actually can get very, very good work done in that kind of deadline-induced kind of element before a deadline, but actually they can report that the level of stress that they feel is just not worth, you know, not worth the good work that they may do. So obviously we're trying to look at ways to be able to do good work, but not have to do it in such a stressful situation or circumstance. So there's a couple of different ways in which we can procrastinate, and there's 12 of them actually altogether. So it's kind of looking to see if any of us identify with any of them. So for example, you could be the cleaner who ends up saying, you know, I have to clean my whole desk before I can sit down to do any study. And then you end up cleaning your whole room or your whole house or whatever, and a whole day has passed and you haven't had a chance to do the work. The other one then is the panicker. So as I said before, that's kind of like the perfectionism paralysis, in which you get so panicked about it that we never actually end up starting it at all. The next thing then is somebody who's a list maker. I'm definitely something like this, who just the act of making a list makes me feel like I've done some work, which I actually haven't. You know, it's just literally saying, right, I'm going to make a list, and then I don't actually do any of the points on the list, you know. So it's kind of sometimes acknowledging how you procrastinate specifically. The next one is the napper, which doesn't require so much description, I suppose. The next one then is the side tracker. And what that might mean is that let's say if you have an essay due in 2 days and an essay due in 2 weeks' time, and the essay in 2 weeks' time is the one you're kind of more interested in, you'll say, oh, you know, I have this great idea, or I want to work on that particular essay, so I'm going to do that one first, and you don't end up working on the one that's coming up imminently. So that's kind of saying you kind of justify procrastinating one thing by doing work on another one, if that makes sense. The next thing then is a social sharer. So it's kind of putting on social media, you know, oh, look at me doing loads of work, or look at me not doing any work, all that sort of stuff. And then looking at a few of the other ones is the internet researcher. So this is, I suppose, particularly pertinent right now with all of us working from home on laptops and things like that, is that we can really get into a rabbit hole in our research online, and in a lot of the times that might actually end up in a bit of a tangent. We don't actually end up looking at stuff that's relevant to what we're trying to study. The next one then is a snacker. That is a very common one as well, is that you're just like, I just need a little snack before I start into it. The next one is the gamer then. So you might end up, saying, I'm just going to finish this level, I'm just going to finish this game before I start into my college work. And then it ends up being playing another game or playing another level and things like that. This is similar to the watcher. The watcher is somebody, obviously, and I think a lot of us can relate to this, is where we might be watching a show and then we say, I'm just going to watch one more episode before I start doing my essay or something like that. And then, as you know, you've watched a whole season in the day and your whole day is gone. The next one then is the delegator, which doesn't actually happen that much, in fairness, in a college setting. This is where, let's say, if you're in a group and you give all of the work to somebody else, or you don't take on the amount of work that you have to. And then the perpetrator as well is also somebody who is kind of saying that they're perpetually putting it off, essentially. So it's kind of the person who says, it's 7 minutes past 4, so I'm just going to leave it until half. So what can be important by this is just looking at and trying to think about for yourself, how do you procrastinate? And acknowledging that and saying, okay, if I am somebody who generally tends to snack or something like that, then you might be like, right, I need to organize my food or whatever beforehand. And actually, somebody just there has said nearly all of the above. So the cleaner and the side tracker, library researcher, absolutely. It sometimes can be a combination. And obviously it also can depend as well on the task in which we're doing. Sometimes some tasks might be just more stressful than others, and we might find 1,000,001 ways to procrastinate doing that particular task. So like I said, it's just thinking back over it and just being more aware about how you are procrastinating. So then if we start to look at actual strategies to combat procrastination, I apologize for the image falling on top of the text. Brightspace is just starting to squish everything together. So I suppose the first one, first and foremost, is acknowledge that you are procrastinating and forgive yourself. Because the problem is that what we do is we say, I've been procrastinating, and then we beat ourselves up about procrastinating, which causes us to procrastinate for longer. So this is, then we end up being the person who's kind of beating ourselves up over the previous procrastination. So acknowledge that you've been procrastinating. Just be real with yourself and say, right, look, I know I've been putting this off. Why have I been doing that? Is it a stressful essay? Do I not know what to read next? Is there something about the topic that I don't really understand? Forgive yourself for the previous procrastination. We can't change what has happened in the past, but we can change what we're doing in the present. So say to yourself, look, procrastination in the past is over and done with now. And then the thing is that it's trying to do something towards the task rather than thinking about doing it. So, for example, instead of saying, okay, I've procrastinated now and I'm going to forgive myself, and then you're like, I'm going to think about my essay, just do one very, very small task towards it. So that might be downloading the assignment brief from Brightspace and reading it. That's one step towards the end goal of having your essay done. That has to be, because you have to know what you're writing before you can do the work. So, as I said, acknowledge and forgive yourself and move on from it. And it's a very, very important way to start dealing with procrastination going forward. The second step is getting rid of distractions, which is a particularly tough one. I really, really appreciate that while we're working from home at the moment. You may be having to manage family commitments and building work that's going on. I have a random bird that sits outside my window that squawks all day, So there's a lot of, even just the distractions of being on a computer. You might be on Brightspace and then you find yourself on YouTube or online shopping or something like that, So first and foremost, if at all possible, do try find a good place to work, be it at home, or obviously if you don't have a place at home and you are needing to go into campus and study, do find a place that is good for you at home. Put your phone away, put it off, or put it on airplane mode. This is, obviously, I appreciate right now that some of us might actually be using our phone to kind of access college work and things like that. But what can be useful then is using a media blocker. And I see somebody else here said about that cold turkey. It is perfect. It's a brilliant app. You can get it both. I think it's for your phone. I think it might be Android, and then your laptop as well. But what's even better about cold turkey is that you can actually schedule it to stop or to start blocking certain websites and apps on your laptop when you want to work. So let's say, for example, you have a 2-hour slot free between your lectures, and you're like, I want to get an hour of work done between 2 and 3 during that time. You can actually pre-schedule it to block, let's say, Facebook, ASOS, the Times, the Irish Times news, whatever it is, during that time frame, so that it doesn't come down to your willpower to actually not go onto the websites. It just is automatically blocked for that amount of time. So it's a really, really good one. And also, when you don't have access to the stuff, you can't go onto it, so it's really, really good. I think you can block stuff between 15 minutes and then up to 8 hours, I think, at a time is what you're able to block for. A few other apps, particularly for other devices, are things like Freedom, which I know works on iOS, and then Self-Control as well. So definitely take a look at those apps to see if they can work for you. The other thing then is about discussing boundaries with family or housemates at home. And obviously this is a really important one at the moment. What can sometimes be hard is the kind of blurred boundary between sitting down to concentrate on your college work and then you being at home, so then people are coming into you or they're distracting you, and it kind of feels like they might think that you're always available, whereas you're actually trying to work. So sitting down with them and actually saying, look, these are the things I have to do today, or these are the classes I have to attend, or this is the study I have to do, can you please, minimize disruptions during that time, or even putting a piece of paper stuck to your door saying, busy right now, will be free at 3 o'clock or something like that, means that it allows them to know that you're not available right now when you're trying to study for college, but that you will be available to them at a particular time. So the next thing then is trying to get organized and manage our time. Particularly with procrastination, sometimes, as I said before, we can procrastinate because we're stressed, and sometimes we might be stressed because we're just a little bit disorganized and not really knowing what we should be doing and when. So first and foremost, know your assignment details and make a plan for them. So gather all of it's like ripping off a plaster, guys. Go onto your Brightspace, gather all the details of your assignments first, because if we don't know them, then we don't know what we're supposed to do for them. So gather all the details as you can. Use a long-term planner to visualize the timeframes, and I'm going to put up a long-term planner for this semester anyway. Put in, let's say, all of the deadlines in it. And what can be useful for doing this is because it gives you an idea about where do your deadlines fall in relation to all of the rest of the deadlines. So for example, you may have 2 deadlines that fall on the same day, or you might have 3 that fall on the same week. And you might say, okay, well, I need to start doing this one earlier so that I can get that one finished on time to start into the next one. The next thing then is using a weekly planner to schedule your study around various commitments. So I've said this before in other workshops, and I'll say it again, is that obviously I appreciate that your role of being a student in UCD is very important, but also the role that you play outside of UCD as well is equally as important. So if you're a mother or a father or a sibling or a friend, or if you work, all that sort of stuff. And also just literally taking care of ourselves as well is paramount in order to be able to do anything else in college or outside of college. So using a weekly planner to kind of schedule out your time so that you know how your day is kind of gonna flow, and are you meeting the commitments that you need to meet. For example, getting enough sleep, making sure that you're eating at regular times, getting the study that you need to get done, and any other commitments you may have outside of academic work. And then the other thing is using reminders, and you can actually use reminders on the likes of Google Calendar, or even setting an alarm on your phone and different things like that, just to kind of remind you about different things coming up, because it means that it gives you a better gauge for your time and how you're spending your time. So Coming here then is looking at goal setting. And I think I've talked about this one in particular in other module or other workshops so far. But essentially goal setting is very important for us to, if we don't set kind of realistic and specific goals, then we don't know what we are working towards. So what SMART goal setting stands for is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. So I'll give an example of this. Let's say if we have a student who says, I am going to write my history essay today. So that's, okay, it's a little bit specified in that we know what module or what topic they're studying or what they're going to write on, but it's very, very vague. So it's not specific enough. We don't know what they're supposed to be doing. It's not measurable. So what do you measure to say that you have met your goal or you've been successful at your goal or not? Is it attainable? It's probably not attainable to get your whole history essay done in one day. Is it relevant? Relevant and attainable kind of go together in this aspect. And then time-based as well. Okay, they said they'll do it in a day, but is that actually realistic? Whereas let's say if we have a student who says, I'm going to write 150 words for my introduction to my Making Modern Europe history essay on between 2 and 3 o'clock today. That's very, very specific. So we know exactly what they need to be working on. We know if they've met it. So is it measurable? Is it attainable? Obviously, this depends on you as a student specifically, and some students may be able to write faster than others or read faster than others, different things like that. And then obviously it's time bound as well. So they kind of have put a bit of a time limit on it. And obviously, like I said, it's very important for you to make sure that these are realistic. There's no point in setting ourselves very unrealistic goals, because then we won't reach them and then we feel worse about it and we end up procrastinating the work. So it's kind of like thinking about this. It's thinking about any of the work that you have sort of like a ladder. And a ladder doesn't have massive gaps or massive steps in between all of the rungs on the ladder. It has very manageable steps for you to be able to get up that ladder safely. That's exactly the same as the work that you have to do in college. Every single essay, every single exam that you sit and everything like that is a sum of all of the tiny little steps you've taken to get to the end point. So yes, the end product may be a 1,500 word essay, but you had to start from you had to start from downloading the brief, opening up and reading it, making a plan for what you wanted to write, finding your sources, writing this amount of words, and so forth. And that is okay. Like I said, think of your college work like a ladder, and you don't jump up a ladder, you take each step at a time, and that's the way to approach it. So the next thing then is prioritizing our workload. And the problem is that if we, sometimes if we have a lot of work to do, we can procrastinate because we don't know where to start. So we have work to do for all of our modules and we don't know which one is the most important, and then we end up getting very overwhelmed and then we don't do any of it. So what can be useful is a thing called the Eisenhower urgency matrix. And this is a matrix, as you can see here, that has 4 quadrants. So it's the columns are labeled urgent and not urgent, and then the rows are labeled important and not important. And anything that falls into the first quadrant are the things that you do. So these are the urgent and very important things that you have to do. So for example, it could be an essay that's due tomorrow. So that is a very urgent and very important task. Things that maybe are not urgent, but they're very important might be, for example, an essay that's due in 2 weeks' time. So it's very important, but it's not the most urgent thing you have to do right now. The third one then is that it's something that's urgent, but it's not as important. And this is the stuff that you might try to delegate. So these may be things like, for example, you need to get a prescription filled. So you may ask if, maybe a family member is able to go get it for you, or while they're out anyway, or something like that. And then obviously the last one is not urgent and not important, which is stuff that we eliminate. And I appreciate that obviously you can't just turn around and say, I'm just not going to do this essay. No, I just don't feel like it, and I'm just never going to do it. Obviously not in relation to our academic work. But if there is things that we are able to kind of put on pause, I suppose, that are not important or urgent right now, and then we can plan to do them at a later date. So what I suggest you do, if you do find that you have a lot of stuff to do right now and you don't really know where to start, is sit down and make a list of everything that you can think of that you have to do. That's academic and non-academic tasks combined. Determine which quadrant that each task falls into. So does it go into the do quadrant, the plan quadrant, so on and so forth, and then get cracking on it. What can be useful to do then is, particularly for the plan quadrant, is actually make a plan for when you're going to do that work. And the reason why this is useful for two reasons. The first one is because it means that you've made a plan to do it, so you will do it when you have that plan. But secondly, it takes or reduces the stress of it all constantly being on your mind, to be like, I have to do that, I have to do that, I have to do that. You've actually made a plan for when you're going to do it in the future, so you've accounted for it elsewhere. And so it just means that it's easier then to focus properly on the stuff that requires your attention right now. Sometimes students might need to kind of prioritize even the stuff that falls into the very first quadrant as well, because you may have a couple of things that fall into it, but that's okay. Just write them down and say, okay, which is the one that needs to be done first, or which is the one that maybe is the hardest task to approach first, and do it that way. So the next thing then, obviously, is kind of trying to think positively, but kind of having a more positive mental outlook on it. So what can be important here is to try to think about the benefits rather than the difficulties of doing something. So what is the benefit of doing this particular thing? Are you learning about a particular topic that you're interested in? Or are you learning how to write an essay that you've never done before, or something like that? Try to replace thoughts which are saying, I need to, or I have to do X, Y, Z, with I want to do X, Y, Z, because it's a lot easier to do things that we want to do than that we have to or need to do. I appreciate, the thing is that we all choose to do the courses that we're on, but obviously we're not the ones who set the assessments in particular that we have to do. So I do appreciate that, yes, you need and have to do this particular assessment that your lecturer has set, but fundamentally you want to do the course and to meet the expectations of it, so it's reminding ourselves about that bigger picture about why we're doing it. And then also, very importantly, think about how good it will feel when you're finished. Like, think about the moment that submit button is clicked on Brightspace and the essay is gone and you're like, oh, I'm free. I know you're probably going on to the next essay then, but do try to think about how good it will feel when you have accomplished it and you have it done. So another thing then is trying to approach a task differently. So the problem is sometimes we can actually procrastinate something if we're trying to approach it in a particular way, but it's not really working for us and we're not getting anywhere or making any progress with something. So first and foremost, try to break down the task into really small chunks first, and then decide, do you want to start with the hardest part first or start with the easiest first? So some people like to start with the hardest thing first and get the hardest one done and out of the way, and everything else after that is much easier. Whereas some people like to get a quick win at first, do the easiest task first to kind of build the momentum up. So try to figure out what one kind of works for you. The other thing then, which is really, really important here, and it's probably one of the most powerful kind of strategies that can work for students, is to use another approach rather than staring at a blank Word document. There is nothing worse than having a blank Word doc with the title of your essay or whatever, and the little cursor just flashing in your face, and it makes us more stressed because we don't have any words on the page. So close down the laptop, put it away. We don't want to focus on that straight away. Approach it differently. So for example, whip out your phone and record yourself discussing your essay. Just literally, essentially spitball all of the ideas that you can think of. It may not make a lot of coherent sense at first, but it's more so to get the ideas out of your brain and just verbally explain them. Then listen back over that recording and just extract even just a few of the main points that you've made and try to maybe structure them in a more coherent way. Type them up as bullet points on your page, and there you go. You have some words on the page to work with. It's just getting that ball rolling. Another method that you can try is a thing called 5-minute free flow writing. And what this is where you get, a paper and a pen, or even a blank Word doc if you wish, and you get out a timer and you put it on for 5 minutes, and you write about one specific kind of topic or something like that. So let's say if you're writing about a specific point in your essay, and you're like, I know what I want to say, but I don't really know what I want to say at the same time. Stick on the timer and write whatever comes to your mind about that particular topic. By the end of it, you might be talking about what you're going to have for dinner later on that night, and that's fine. The point of it is for it to be free. So you're not trying to reference the stuff, you're not trying to form an academic argument or anything like that. This is literally just you getting the ideas out of your head and onto paper. Trust me, you're not going to be submitting this piece of paper to your lecturer like that. I've had students who have written full essays by every single paragraph they have to write, sitting down for 5 minutes and doing free flow writing, and then extracting the main points, typing them up on their computer, and then actually fleshing out the academic writing aspect and putting in their referencing and everything. It's remembering it's to start somewhere and to start the ball rolling with it. The other thing then that can be useful, which is kind of a combination of these, is voice recognition on Microsoft Word or Google Docs. So it's very easy to turn on the voice recognition kind of software on Word and on Google Docs. And essentially what can be useful is you just speaking out the points that you want to make, and the words magically appear on the page. It's amazing. Obviously, the punctuation is not great. And sometimes, particularly with an Irish accent, sometimes it struggles to kind of pick up on particular words or something like that you may have said. However, overall, it can be a really useful way to just get the ideas down on a page. You can go back and edit it, and you can kind of pull it apart and restructure it and things like that. But approaching the task differently just means that it really allows the ball to start rolling. So trying to involve others then, and obviously I really appreciate right now with all of us working and studying from home, it can kind of feel like you're kind of studying in a void, so you're doing all this really, really hard work, and you're like, you can't see anyone else also having the challenges and trying to deal with these things as well. It can kind of feel quite isolating, and I do appreciate that is quite tough. So what can be useful is to try and involve others where possible. So for example, it's kind of trying to create accountability with other people. This might be looking at forming, let's say, a study group with friends or classmates in your class. Or it might be, let's say, letting your housemates or your parents know or something like that what you intend to be studying or working on that day. And this creates accountability for ourselves. So the reason why I say that, or external accountability, I should say. So it's that we are accountable to somebody else, or somebody else at least knows what we're intending to work on. So it's a lot less likely that we're actually going to put off doing that particular task because somebody else knows that we intended to do it. Whereas if somebody doesn't know, it's so much easier for ourselves to say, yeah, I intended to study that thing, but I'll just leave it till tomorrow. I'll just do it tomorrow. And then that keeps happening because it's hard for us to keep ourselves accountable. So having external accountability can be really useful that way. So the other thing then is to reward ourselves. And this is a really, really useful way of kind of helping with procrastination. So for the first kind of image here, it says studying for 10 minutes and reward ourselves with 2 hours of pointless internet use. That is not the type of reward I mean. Obviously, they need to be realistic, realistic rewards that we might do. So for example, it might be that you want to get through a certain amount of lecture slides, so you say, okay, I'm going to try get through half of them, and I'm going to reward myself by going downstairs, having a short break and making myself a cup of coffee, and then I'm going to come back upstairs and I'm going to finish off doing the rest of the lecture slides. Or it might be saying to yourself, okay, there's this game I really, really want to play, but I'm not going to play it until after 8 o'clock tonight when I have XYZ finished. And then also the other thing is that when we the longer term or the bigger goals for, let's say you handed in an assignment or you finished an exam or something like that, I appreciate right now it can feel very weird being at home and doing everything at home, that it kind of sometimes doesn't really feel real in a sense, about you actually have submitted an essay or you completed an exam online. So you should celebrate that. It may be a little bit harder to do it, but acknowledge that you have done a very, very big and challenging thing, and reward yourself for doing it, getting a nice takeaway or calling a friend or something like that, and make a big deal about it, because it is important to do that. So just a few words of advice before I wrap up here is, it's very important to accept that you probably will procrastinate at some point, and that is totally fine. The thing about procrastination is, like I said before, it is a constant human struggle. We don't just learn how to manage procrastination and then never procrastinate again. That's definitely not the case at all. But what can be useful is to be aware and be more aware about identifying when you are procrastinating, why you're procrastinating, and then trying to figure out strategies to move past that. With that then, it's experiment with the strategies. Not everything will work for everyone. Different strategies work for different people, and it also works for different modules as well. So there might be one reason why you're procrastinating a particular module that might be different to another module. So it's just trying to figure out strategies that work depending on what you're doing. The other thing then is trying to be honest with ourselves. So really, we are the only people in our lives who can stop procrastination, and this is what I mean, is that everyone struggles with this in some capacity. So you're not alone in that regard. But as I said, we are the only people in our own lives who can actually stop procrastination and actually help deal with it. The other thing is practice. So the more we get used to implementing these strategies, the easier then, or the more automatic they become, so that it actually is harder then to procrastinate doing a piece of work. And then the last thing here really is to just try not to overthink it and just do it. So what I mean by that is that sometimes we can get so wrapped up in thinking about doing something that we actually never get around to doing it. So it can be important, even if it's a teeny tiny little step towards the end goal of an essay or your exams or something like that. Any little step towards it is a step towards it, and so it's just making, even if it is just downloading something or making a plan for what you're going to do or something like that, is one step towards it overall. And this is a lovely little kind of, would you call it a meme? I don't think you call this one a meme, but essentially it says, tomorrow being the definition of a mystical land where 99% of all human productivity, motivation, and achievement is stored. So it's always this sense of that tomorrow holds far more potential than today does. But actually, today is what we have control over. So today is the time that we can actually start to gain control of our procrastination. So if anyone has any questions, I'm just going to quickly stop recording in case anyone wants to speak. There we go. Does anybody have any questions? If they want to put them in the chat or turn on their mic, feel free to do so. Oh, something rhymed. I don't know what I had said at the time that rhymed, but maybe something I said had rhymed in a good way. Okay. Give just an extra minute just in case anyone's chatting. No question, thank you. Some very helpful gems in there. Absolutely, Sean. I hope even if there's just one or two things that maybe you can try out that might help, please feel free to do it. And like I said, it's the most important thing, if anyone can take anything from this, is just to acknowledge and forgive ourselves and to move past that. That's really, really important. Okay, that is grand. I don't think there's any more kind of questions or anything like that. The recording for this will be going up on our Brightspace module as normal, and then we won't be having any academic skills during the 2-week break, but it will be back on the 24th of March, and I think it'll be myself as well looking at self-care at that point. So I will see everyone then, and thanks very much for coming along.
Thank you.
No problem, Sean. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.